Hi, folks. What's up? This is Stephen Mullins here. Today, I just wanted to jump on here and talk a little bit about, well, it's a bandwagon issue. The Mohler Amendment that just passed pretty well overwhelmingly at the SBC convention down in Orlando this past week. Um, I've seen a lot of folks commenting on this, a lot of podcasters and tweeters and everything else making their comments one way or the other. And honestly, there's a lot of folks that are talking it up, but they're not citing the specific verbiage of the amendment. They're talking up the advantages, but they're not looking at the specific verbiage of the amendment. And so I wanted to jump on here today. Let's begin by reading. We're going to go straight to the Bible. I know that's a rather novel idea in 2026, but we're going to go straight to the Bible. 1 Timothy chapter 3, looking at the first 7 verses. This is a true saying, if a man desire the office of a bishop, he desireth a good work. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, able to teach, not given to wine, no striker, not greedy of filthy lucre, but patient, not a brawler, not covetous, one that ruleth well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? Not a novice, lest being lifted up with pride he fall in the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must have a good report of them which are without, lest he fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. The word of God for the people of God. Praise be to God. Now, without getting into the weeds as to the nature and subject of the Mohler Amendment, let's just say that the wording of it is very troubling. The wording of it is inviting more controversy than it seeks to dispel. But the bigger issue is what it does not do. The Mohler Amendment addresses an issue. If we're looking at it in agricultural terms, the Mohler Amendment addresses the fruit, but it does not take time to look at the root. What's the root problem? The root problem is a lack of transparency, specifically amongst full-time pastors. Most of these full-timers don't stay with the church for very long. Year and a half, 2, maybe 3 years, and then they move on. These guys are ladder climbers. They go to one church, get just enough experience to move up to a bigger, better church, get a little bit more experience, move up to an even bigger, better church, get a little bit more experience, move up to an even bigger, better church. Ladder climbers are not shepherds. Ladder climbers are hired hands. Ladder climbers don't know the sheep, and the sheep don't know ladder climbers. If a guy only stays at the church for a year and a half, 2 years, maybe 3 years, that's a problem. No congregation can get to know him. Ladder climbers are folks who think that all there is to ministry is preaching. Ladder climbers are folks that think that all that they have to do is stand up in the pulpit. But there's a lot more to ministry. There's a lot more to pastoral work than just what's done behind the sacred desk. In addition, this Mohler Amendment, proposed by the president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, really turns him into something that he would steer the students of the seminary from. That is, it turns him into a one-verse wonder. He's looking at one verse. And the section that I read, verses 1 through 7, that is one section. And if we're going to get to the root of the problem, we don't get to the root by looking at the fruit. Yeah, the fruit is a problem. We've got rotten fruit. But you got to get back to the root. You got to address the lack of transparency. The lack of transparency is most evident by the lack of ordination standards. How many times have I seen churches that schedule an ordination council and the ordination service on the same day? They've effectively said that the ordination council is a moot point. I've been through an ordination council. I've sat on a lot of ordination councils. And you know what I've discovered? Ordination councils only cover book learning. These ladder climbers, these folks that spend 1.5, 2, maybe 3 years at a church and then move on to a bigger, better church. All they are left brain bookworms. They don't know how to get their hands dirty. And the ordination council, where that candidate sits at a table with 6 or 8 or 10 or ever how many ordained men, only get to ask questions that come from book learning. I've never heard a candidate ask any real, meaningful, substantive question. Of how they're going to relate to the people to whom they serve. Anybody can read a bunch of books and get all of this. But how are we going to address the lack of transparency? I've only known one man that showed any type of real transparency. And he wasn't perfect with it, but then again, he didn't have any good examples. That man served faithfully in ministry for, I think, over 50 years, or right at 50 years. And he was probably the most transparent. He was the best at being transparent that I've ever seen. But then again, the best, the most, still isn't quite real transparency, is it? He was just doing better than what he had observed. I've known some of these ladder climbers. Some of these ladder climbers are absolute dumpster fires. Every church that they go to, there's a path of destruction. And when they leave, they leave that church in the wake of destruction. So the next guy has to come along and clean up a bunch of mess. Some of these ladder climbers, they rise to the level of their incompetency. And then they crash and burn. Sometimes these ladder climbers even come back from crashing and burning. And then crash and burn again. And then they come back, and then they crash and burn again. But if we as Christians begin demanding transparency, demanding not only that it be modeled, but that it be molded. In the coming days, I'm going to be working on a statement on ordination standards. And those standards are going to be built around the issue of transparency. Things like the candidate must sit under a mentor for 2 to 3 years. That mentor must model for the candidate real and honest transparency. That mentor must not only model real and honest transparency, but mold within the candidate a spirit of real and honest transparency. Let's get away from these left brain, book learning preacher boys. And let's get back to the simple text of the Bible. This is a true saying. If a man desire the office of a bishop, he desireth a good work. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good report, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach, not given to wine, no striker, not greedy of filthy lucre, but patient, not a brawler, not covetous, one that ruleth well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? Not a novice, lest being lifted up with pride, he fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must have a good report of them which are without, lest he fall into the reproach and snare of the devil. Let's try to meet and exceed the transparency of that man who served faithfully for about 50 years. Let's make him the standard. He is now in that great cloud of witnesses, cheering you on. Stand upon his shoulders. Meet his level of transparency. And exceed it. Model it and mold it. Let's throw out these preachers that are absolute dumpster fires. Let's throw out these preachers who rise to the level of their incompetency only to crash and burn. Thankfully, one of those preacher boys has been out of the ministry for almost 8 years now. May he never get back behind the pulpit again. Let's get back to being a people of the book. For this is the Word of God for the people of God. Praise be to God. Go and serve your King.